I want to tell you a story. It comes to us from the context of the post, I suppose you could say, the decades following the French Revolution. It comes out of that epic story of Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. It's the story of Jean Valjean, a fictional character of Victor Hugo's. And it traces his journey. A young, impressionable man who stole a loaf of bread to feed his starving family, who was caught and imprisoned. 19 years of hard labour in the French penal system for stealing a loaf of bread. He entered this prison as a young, impressionable man and emerged as a hardened, toughened person. No one could break Jean Valjean's will, and no one could beat him in a fight. He was a tough individual. And when he was finally released, he had to carry a card, a convict card that said he was a convict, a released convict. And therefore no one wanted to put him up. No inn would take him in. It was tough. He wandered 4 days, not knowing what to do or where to go. Finally, a kindly old bishop took him in and looked after him for the night. When they went to bed, Jean Valjean lay quietly in his bed until the sounds of the house dissipated and the bishop and his sister were asleep. He then quietly got up and crept downstairs, raided the cabinets for the family silver. 6 silver bowls and the bishop's pride and joy, a silver soup ladle. And he crept out of the house and took off. In the morning, 3 gendarmes turned up at the bishop's door, knocked on the door, and they had Jean Valjean in their midst. And they said to the bishop, "We caught this rogue running from your house, and in his bag is silver, family silver, and so we're just reporting to you that we've caught him and he will now be locked away for life." Jean Valjean faced life imprisonment. The little bit of the freedom and the opportunity he'd gotten, he'd turned on, and that was his last chance. In that moment when everything was lost, when the cycle of his life had spiralled down to its lowest point, something quite surprising, disturbing, mysterious and wondrous happened. The bishop turned to Jean Valjean and said, "My friend, you left in such a hurry that you forgot the candlesticks that I gave you. They too are silver, worth a good 200 francs. You forgot them." Then he turned to the gendarmes and said, "It's okay, all is well." Reassured, the gendarmes went on their way. Jean Valjean's face registered the shock, the surprise, the confusion. And when the bishop spoke to him next, it was in the same tones. He took him inside and he gave him the candlesticks. And he said to them, "Remember, I want you to always remember, never forget. You have now promised me to use this silver to make an honest man of yourself." Jean Valjean was stunned and confused and thrown into chaos. His world had turned upside down in an instant. He left and wandered. All the while something happening within him. This new dynamic at work in his life. And the next day, in his wandering and his puzzlement, his confusion, he just collapsed on a rock. And he tore at his hair and he just cried out, "What a wretch I am. What a wretch I am." And then he wept. He cried like he hadn't cried in years. What had his life come to? Where had it ended up? How did it get to this? Grief, shame, guilt, despair. And yet, in the midst of that grief and despair and shame, a light began to shine. Well, a light that began to shine the day before, when this kindly bishop had not only taken him in, but had given him this silver, had given him forgiveness, love, mercy, hope, grace. And this light flared up within him, within his inner being, and it filled him with hope. And Jean Valjean went on to make something of his life. He became the well-respected mayor of the town. In fact, there was this detective who followed him all the time, looking for one misdemeanor that he could put him away in prison for. He never found it. I like that story because even though it's a fictional story, I think it's a true story. It's a true story because it's our story. It's a story of human beings. And we all wrestle in this life with these two dynamics, systems operating on us. There's this system. I mean, I've also been wrestling with Paul's writing, particularly in Romans 6 this week, a passage that will be read in churches this week. Paul would say this one dynamic is the reign of sin and death. It's language that probably doesn't register too much with us. Sin has become, a used and abused word in many ways, with fire and brimstone, hellfire, preaching, and people within their belief systems, fanatical, left and right. If you don't believe this, think this, agree with this, do this, you're a sinner, and all the implications. That's not what Paul's on about. For Paul, sin is really about those choices, those things we do, and these choices we make, decisions we make, that lead us away from this relationship with God, who is at the heart of all things. This relationship of love. And leads us into conflict, ultimately. Conflict with other people, conflict with the earth, conflict with ourselves, and of course conflict or alienation, if you like, with God. Alienation from other people, the earth, ourselves, and from God. And that alienation is exactly what Jean Valjean experienced. He was a victim of circumstance, culture, context. He was a victim of other people's decisions and his own decisions. And it took him down and down and down. The other system or dynamic that worked in his life was the inbreaking, the apocalyptic inbreaking of love, of grace, forgiveness, mercy, compassion. That at the moment in his life when he was at his lowest and probably deserved punishment for what he'd done, he was forgiven. And he was given a chance to become the person he was created to be. Because all these other things, this whole reign of sin and death, as Paul would call it, took him down and prevented him from being the person that he was created to be. The act of love through that bishop, the inbreaking love through that bishop, enabled him to become the person that he was destined, he was created to be. And that's the same with all of us. And in our world, these two systems, these two dynamics operate. And it's not like, you follow the way of love or Christ or whatever language you want to use, and suddenly this reign of sin or death or the evil or whatever it is disappears. We always live in this messy, murky world between the two. We make choices that are good and choices that are bad. We make choices that lead us into conflict with other people. Alienation, We say things that later we think, oh, why did I say that? Or we say things in such a way that the manner or the way we've said it conveys a different meaning. And it kind of alienates us. It's actually not an action grounded in love. And so much of our world, so much of our media and the stories we hear and the way they're presented are not about love, but about judgment. And they come out of conflict and alienation. Why should that person get help? Whether it's that Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. Of course all lives matter. But black lives have got to matter as much as other lives. When we experience love, something changes within us. And all this love comes from the heart of God. And Paul says the reign of God, the reign of Christ, the reign of love, this generosity, this love, this compassion, this forgiveness, this mercy, is a dynamic that operates in our lives. And it's over and against this other dynamic which he calls sin or death. The kinds of things that are about judgment and alienation. When you look at things and you compare, on the media, compare yourself. I'm not good enough. I don't look pretty enough, or I don't look, I haven't got the muscles, or I haven't got the right career, I don't have the big enough house, or the best car, or the best job, or I don't have the right education, or I haven't done this, or I haven't done that. Everything's about me and comparing myself, and it's a spiral downwards. In other parts of our culture, it's about wealth will make you happy and give you everything you need. And we pursue that way, affluence and so on, and it lets us down. Or power. Can I have all power? And we try and control and gain power, and we often become abusive. We gain wealth, we become selfish. We gain power, we become abusive. Very few can handle real power. It takes a really well-formed individual, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, those sort of people. Paul says there's this dynamic of love that operates, and it's a way of life. It's a way that will bring us life and help us to become the people we are, and help us to and open us up to a world of others, so that we share what we have and we share resources and we think about and care for the earth, not just the human race's progress or prosperity, but the well-being of the plants and the trees and the animals, the rivers and the creeks and the mountains and the valleys. It's about considering other people, other cultures. I'm really moved and disturbed by the genocide and horrors that the West Papua and our nearest neighbours are facing at the hands of the Indonesian colonial power. It's probably not a whole lot different from our own history if we read our own history. But these gentle, lovely people, them and their culture are being destroyed, as have many other indigenous cultures throughout the world. The dynamic of love that Jean Valjean experienced, that Paul experienced, that is our experience, is a transformative power in our lives to bring life not just to me, but to the world in which I live. And it invites us into a deeper journey, a journey into the way of Christ, the Trinity of love, that holds us in gentle love, in mysterious, wondrous grace, and in life. I invite you to follow in this way of Christ.